This is your station for your town. 102.5 The Bridge.
You got what it takes to be. That's right. You got what it takes to be.
Showaddywaddy. Got what it takes. 6 minutes after 11 on the Big Decades with Mark Spate. If you want to be in with a chance to win a copy of Showaddywaddy's The Very Best of CD, simply answer this question. Showaddywaddy had a #1 hit in 1976 with A, Under the Heart of Love, B, Under the Sun of Love, or C, Under the Moon of Love. Email your answers to studio@thebridgeradio.net or text your answers. Text the word bridge, leave a space and send your message to 64446 or give us a call 01384 82 1025. Don't forget to leave your contact details should you be a winner. All terms and conditions are on our website, thebridgeradio.net/Big Decades. Okay, our special guest we have on the line at the moment is from Showaddywaddy, Dave Bartram. Good morning, Dave. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. And you?
Yeah, thanks for joining us. What's the weather like in your part of the world today?
It's actually a very pleasant spring day.
It's lovely here. It's nice and warm. It's forecast rain a little bit later on, but I think spring has arrived.
At long last, and it was a long time in coming this year.
So let's start and have a quick listen to what is Showaddywaddy.
Now there's are 3 steps to heaven. Pretty little angel, pretty little angel, pretty little, pretty little, pretty little angel. Remember then, remember no, I love you like I do. No, under the moon of love. Let's sit right down and talk. Under the moon of love. Let's go for a little.
11 minutes after 8 on the Big Decades. We're joined by Dave Bartram from Showaddywaddy. Let's start at the beginning, Dave, and go all the way back to the 70s when it all began for Showaddywaddy. I think it was on a talent competition, wasn't it, called New Faces. Tell us how it all began.
Well, we formed in 1973 an amalgamation of 2 bands, and we built up quite a healthy following, and we were doing a gig in Birmingham one night, and a silver-haired gentleman walked into the dressing room and said, "Hey lads, how would you like to be on TV?" And we thought, yeah, we'll have some of that. That sounds great. That would take us to a wider audience. And we found ourselves a few weeks later on what I suppose was the Britain's Got Talent of its day, a show called New Faces.
That was that the one by? It wasn't Mickey Most, was it? Who was on
Yeah.
New Faces? Was it Mickey Most?
Was regularly one of the panellists.
That's right.
It was hosted by a guy called Derek Hobson, who I think got a bit big for his boots and was moved elsewhere. I think the last time I saw him, he was presenting a show called That's My Dog. So as our career went in one direction, I think Derek's was going in the other.
So it all started with you with the single Hey Rock and Roll. Who wrote that?
Myself and Trevor Oakes wrote the first 4 Showaddywaddy singles, which a lot of people actually don't realise that the early hits were all self-penned efforts.
And when Showaddywaddy first began, who were your musical influences?
Well, I mean, the person who first made me actually want to sing was Ray Charles. From a pretty early age, I just sensed this incredible emotion in his voice, and wanted to. Although I could never lick the man's boots, I just wanted to open my mouth and sing. And obviously, you know, as I was growing, the Beatles, Lennon was one of my heroes, and I also admired the Rolling Stones greatly, who unbelievably are still out there doing it.
They're still out there doing it, yeah. You say that 40th anniversary this year of Showaddywaddy. Did you ever think you would last so long?
Well, I didn't quite make it that far because I quit the band at the end of 2011. But 38 years was a hell of a long time. time, and to have a Showaddywaddy touring for its Ruby anniversary is quite something.
It's something. There's a big achievement. You probably asked this question many times. I've often wondered this myself. Where did the name Showaddywaddy come from?
Well, it was a pretty simple thing. We were looking for a name, and we wanted something a little bit different. And I was listening to a song that we were about to put in our set, a song called "Little Darling" by an American doo-wop band called the Diamonds. In the background, I could hear purring away, "Bop bop Showaddywaddy," and I thought, Showaddywaddy, that's a good word, and put it to the boys, and I suppose, as you would say, in a cliche, the rest was history.
Many people use those lyrics, didn't they? I've just been playing the Rubettes and Sugar Baby Love, and that was Showaddywaddy.
That song was actually written for Showaddywaddy.
Yes, I read that. It was originally penned for you, wasn't it? And
It was. It was basically it was written by a couple of guys called Wayne Bickerton and Tony Waddington, who were writing a lot of stuff for Polydor Records at that time, who had their eyes on signing us, but in the end we opted for Bell Records, and it led to the formation of the Rubettes.
I remember on Bell Records when I remember the Under the Moon of Love coming out. I'm going to make you feel old now. I was only 12.
I wasn't that much older myself.
So, and I remember seeing you on the Royal Variety performance show, and you met the Queen Mum, didn't you? What did she say to you?
We did indeed. It was lovely because obviously all the performers queue up on the stage at the end, sort of hoping to meet the Queen Mum. As Lord Delphon walked over and expressed that the Queen Mum wanted to meet the King's Singers and Showaddywaddy. We felt very, very honoured as the rest of them sort of had to wait in the background for their turn to meet her. And on she walked, a very elegant lady, and still to this day I don't think I've seen diamonds glittering beneath the lights quite like that.
Yeah, some of your early recordings, they were quite distinctive, and I was reading that most of them were recorded in the Rain Studios in Leicester. What was so special about the Rain Studios?
You've got me there. I've never recorded at a place called Rain.
No, I read that on an article somewhere. You were recorded in the Rain Studios.
No, we didn't. That certainly wasn't one that we used. No, most of the early recordings actually were done in London, a place called the Music Centre in Wembley, London. Yeah.
We've been asking our listeners to come up with some questions. Miriam from Dudley has been in charge. She says, is it true that Shaky Stevens was once one of your support acts?
It is, yeah. We knew Shaky for many years, and as we were sort of becoming big, regularly they would put rock and roll bills together, and Shaky was still sort of on the first rung of the ladder, so to speak, and he supported us on 2 or 3 occasions.
Yeah, I was listening to one of your songs earlier on, and I could hear. I don't know whether he did backing vocals for some of your songs. Did he or not? Or
no.
I thought I could hear him on one of the tunes there.
No, it wasn't Shaky. No, he sort of kept very much himself to himself when he was recording. And the strange thing about the 70s, there were very rarely any collaborations in those days. I mean, it's a huge thing now to sort of do duets albums or to guest on people's songs, but the 70s wasn't really about that. It was more about individuals.
Yes, yeah. One thing I liked about Showaddywaddy was the fact that you didn't take yourselves too seriously. You enjoyed having a laugh, and I think that came across. Well,
that once again portrays the 1970s. It was. If you took yourself too seriously, people didn't really want to know. It was about trying to outglum your competitors in a sense, and to be bright and colourful and do all these nifty movements, and we were pretty good at that, which I think is how we got noticed.
Yeah, many of our listeners in this region will remember you the time when you presented Pop Watch on Central News. Well, what were your memories of Pop Watch? I remember Pop Watch.
Crikey, yeah. It was marvellous. I was actually out having a couple of drinks with a guy who who used to present Tiswas, a guy called Trevor East, and he was doing pretty well within Central Television at the time, and he said, we're putting together a new sort of magazine pop show, and we're looking for a presenter. Are you interested? And I thought, that sounds like another rung to the bow, so to speak. So another string to the bow, should I rephrase? But I found myself at Central Television, firstly in Birmingham and then in Nottingham, doing this thing called Pop Watch, which was very exciting.
I remember watching that. I remember when you went from Bell to Arista. I remember there was this one specific song I absolutely loved. It was called "Take Me in Your Arms." Who's responsible for releasing that song? 'Cause I loved it, and it didn't chart, did it? I absolutely loved that tune.
I think the problem with "Take Me in Your Arms," it's a song that's close to me because it's a self-penned one. So it was on a huge selling album, and it was actually the first song that was drawn from an album as a single, and it was rather odd when it didn't chart at all, which I think suggested that a lot of people had probably already got the tune on the album, But no, I loved that song. There was a great guitar solo midway by Russ Field, one of his best efforts, I always thought.
I remember one of your biggest, if not the biggest hits that Showaddywaddy had was Under the Moon of Love. It spent something like 15 weeks in the charts, and I remember it was around Christmas time, and it was knocked off the #1 spot by Johnny Mathis, wasn't it, on Christmas Eve?
It was indeed, yeah. A bit of a sob story to lose your perch on Christmas Eve, but...
were you expecting to be #1 at Christmas?
Well, it would have been lovely, but you know, we actually, a couple of years after our greatest hits album was #1 for Christmas, so that more than made up for it.
What do you think when you hear your own tunes played on the radio?
Well, it's odd, actually. Sometimes, I'm driving along, and it takes me a while for it to register that it's actually me singing, and then all of a sudden I think, oh, crikey, there's a little bit more PRS.
Okay, we're going to have a listen to Under the Moon of Love, then we'll come back and we'll talk about this new book, and I want to talk about your solo album Lost and Found. So if you just hang on the line, we'll play Under the Moon of Love and we'll come back and speak to you in a moment, Dave.
Yeah, brilliant.
Showaddywaddy, Under the Moon of Love, reached #1 in the UK charts in 1976. 21 minutes after 11 on the Big Decades with me, Mark Spate. We're joined on the telephone by Showaddywaddy's, of course, Dave Bartram. Dave Bartram, the man of Showaddywaddy. You retired from Showaddywaddy, didn't you, back in 2011? Was that a difficult decision to make?
The decision, yeah, when you've been on the road for so many years, and it was 38 years, and I think it was around 37 when I suddenly sort of realised that the whole thing was becoming a bit of a drudge, and being on the road and getting home at 4 a.m. in the morning, I really wasn't spending too much time with the family and stuff like that. There were so many contributory factors, but ultimately it was a huge decision, but it's one that I feel was right. I felt I sort of left at a time when the enjoyment was on the wane a little.
Do you miss performing?
Yeah, I mean, there are times when I do, but there are other times when I'm sort of maybe out with friends and I'm thinking of the band travelling home from Scotland and stuff like that, and I think the decision was a pretty wise one.
Do you still get to see the guys?
Oh, yeah, indeed. I actually still manage the band. I had actually managed the band since 1984, so got a bit of experience under my belt there. But still regularly see them.
What advice would you give a group if they're starting today? It's different now, isn't it, from now to the 70s. You look at things like the X Factor and all these talent competitions now. What advice would you give somebody if they wanted to begin a career in music now?
Well, it is different now, but in a sense, it's maybe slightly more organised, because in the 60s and 70s there were so many artists that sort of got their foot on the ladder and were subsequently ripped off by either unscrupulous record companies or managements and so on and so forth. But in a sense, there's so much legal stuff involved these days. So the thing that any aspiring artist needs to do is to find a good manager with a good brain and plenty of enthusiasm to get them out there.
You say with the digital age today, a lot of things have changed. You used to have to get something like about 500,000, 1 million records to get a number one. Now, digitally, you don't need so many, and you're straight in at number one. You're only staying there for a matter of a week. Things are so different now, this digital age.
Well, things have changed considerably, and it's wonderful for artists like ourselves because, having sold all those records that you mentioned in the 70s and 80s, we get to the digital age and everybody wants them on their iPods, so they repurchase them all over again, which is wonderful. And in actual fact, there's a little story that goes with that. Our single "Under the Moon of Love," which got to number one in '76, it got to the giddy heights of 990,000 copies sold, and subsequently, with the digital age, we've actually now passed the magic million, so that was wonderful.
Oh, congratulations. Now, you released a solo album titled Lost and Found. The tracks from this album were recorded in the 80s. Let's have a quick preview of these songs.
Slipping and sliding onto your hide. These things I wanted to tell you the most. Maybe it got washed away with all the tears that I shed that day. There's no way I could say it better. I wrote it all in my love letters. Through the days, see how the flavors taste. These are the dreams you save. I cried so fast, but I should be kind of see. Oh, I can't help it. I'm crying.
That's Dave Bartram's album Lost and Found, joined on the telephone by Showaddywaddy's Dave Bartram. I absolutely love that album. I put it on my iPod. I was coming to work this morning and listening to this. I think I played it twice back to back. What made you release these particular tracks?
Well, actually, it was largely down to a couple of very, very enthusiastic long-term fans who knew of the recordings and were very active in sort of finding someone willing to take on these old songs that I'd sort of, I don't know if the tapes from my loft covered in dust, and it was great to finally for them to see the light of day, and when people like yourself say that they're really enjoying listening to it, it gives me a real glow. It's fantastic.
Now, in February this year, you published a book titled The Boys of Summer, A Rock and Roll Nightmare with Showaddywaddy. Many readers may think this book is an autobiography. I understand it isn't, is it?
It's not an autobiography. I mean, there are autobiographical sort of elements within the book, but ultimately it covers a 10-week period in 2005 when the band sort of the heady days of hysteria were long gone, and we undertook a tour of caravan parks up and down the land, the likes of which the facilities left quite a lot to be desired, and there's quite a lot of funny and even tragic stories in there of the events of that tour, which I've had some great reviews, so once again it's giving me a great boast. But I recommend it to anyone who's going to sunnier climes and sitting on a sunbed with endless sunshine, reading about the caravan parks of the UK.
I have ordered it. I'm going on holiday, as I say, in a couple of weeks' time, and I have ordered it. It's going to be there with the sun lounger in the sun with a large G&T or something sitting by the pool reading that. I'm looking forward to it.
That sounds like a good plan.
When I read the title, Rock and Roll Nightmare, it kind of does it describe ups and downs? Because when you read in the title Nightmare, you think this guy probably had some good times with Showaddywaddy. Obviously, he had some bad times. It highlights both, does it?
Well, it was pretty squalid. I mean, I'll give you an example. We'd done one of these gigs, and generally, as I say, the facilities left a lot to be desired. There were very, very small stages and very sort of sweaty atmospheres, and not really enough room to put our gear into a lot of these venues. But I remember after doing one such show, I went back to my caravan, and which was thrown in, the accommodation was thrown in, which was all part of the deal, and took a shower to wash all the sweat from the performance away, and all of a sudden someone barged into the caravan, and there was I toweling myself down stark naked, and a rather red-faced woman, and all of a sudden behind her there was a guy who took a swing at me, and I thought, what is going on here? As this guy became a little bit violent. But they'd had rather too much to drink and they'd gone back to the wrong caravan.
So if you had to look back on your career, what would you say was the highlight of your career?
Well, in 38 years, there are many, many highlights. Obviously, going to number one with Under the Moon of Love was an amazing experience back in 1976. The number one Christmas album, I'm very, very proud of that, in Christmas 78. Mm-hmm. Playing arenas and tours packed out to hysterical females. It's a career that most people, I think, would dream of, and I'm one of the lucky few to have been there and got the T-shirt. So what's next for Dave Bartram? Well, the next I'm actually working on my second book, which actually covers the whole sort of 40 years of Showaddywaddy, and once again, it's more of a light-hearted look at things, but there's a few stories that I think will make people sit up and think, did that really happen?
Okay, before we part, I always ask my guests some silly questions. There are 5 silly questions we would just ask at random. They're probably just random ones. They are silly. Who was the Joker in the band in Showaddywaddy?
Al James.
Al James, why was it?
He just had a great line of wit. He was very, very sharp with his wit.
Yeah. Music-wise, what was the best decade for you?
The best decade, I think possibly for myself, the 80s.
Yeah.
Was when I was probably more creative, and you mentioned the Lost and Found album. There's a lot of the results of when I really got writing again and became very inspired in a slightly different musical sense.
Yeah. Who's the biggest moaner in the band?
The biggest moaner was Trevor Oakes.
And who had the worst dress sense?
That would also be Trevor.
Trevor as well. I hope he's not listening.
A tracksuit. That's enough for him.
And finally, I won't say what a DA is because of our listeners. I won't say what it stood for, but who had the best DA haircut?
The best DA haircut? Oddly enough, I don't think anybody actually had a DA.
Didn't they?
No, we had rather more sort of 70s influenced hairstyles.
Yeah, because the dress of Showaddywaddy was the typical teddy boy, wasn't it?
It was based on the teddy boys, but slightly more colourful, yeah.
Yeah, the colours are absolutely bizarre, absolutely good. Dave Bartram from Showaddywaddy, thank you for joining us today, much appreciated.
It's been a pleasure.
We wish you every success in everything you're going to do. I'm going to get that book, enjoy it, sitting by the pool.
That's brilliant. I've got something wonderful to look forward to now.
Thank you for joining us.
Back to mow my lawn, so all the best to you.